And we're live.
All right. Start like that. Let's get this thing done.
Let's do this. Episode 2.
All right. Episode 2. We are going to do the philosophy of philosophy. Yeah, that's right. We're getting super meta with it right out the gate.
We're going to define terms.
Yeah. Yeah, and just explore what is philosophy and all the branches of philosophy. Yeah, which should take actually quite a while. Philosophy gets really complicated.
Yeah, let's go slowly and take our time. Make sure we say what we want to say on each of the topics.
Yeah. So I guess to start, let's break down the word philosophy, which is what they typically do, to start any Greek philosophy class. So philosophy, yeah, philein is the first part of philosophy, which means lover, and Sophia is the second part, which means wisdom. So that's where we derive the word from. So it just means lover of wisdom.
Yeah, or one of the ways that I like to think about it as an actual 2-part word, where you have to have the love and the wisdom. Not necessarily this infatuation with knowing ideas, but acting out the love as well as acting out the wisdom. They're connected. Right from the beginning, they're connected.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they would agree with that. And the Greeks had, kind of knowledge broken down into philos, which is science and kind of science-related stuff, so like the physical view of the world. And then mythos, which is just storytelling. So, like, telling ethical tales through storytelling, which is kind of religion, more or less, or a whole bunch of other, or Aesop's fables, or any story that teaches a moral philosophy.
Yeah.
And yeah, through both of those, that's how you acquired knowledge. Yeah, but let's break down, the 6 branches of philosophy, which are metaphysics, which is what is real. That's what that typically deals with. Epistemology, which is how do we know what is real. And then we have value theory, which is divided into ethics, which I think everybody knows what ethics is. It's just how to conduct yourself morally. And then aesthetic philosophy, which is the philosophy of beauty and the study of beauty, which is interesting that that gets its own branch in philosophy, but it does. And then the final, political philosophy is another category, and everyone knows what political philosophy is because we argue about that stuff all the time, and that's definitely relevant in modern times. And then the final branch of philosophy is logic, which is the toolbox that philosophers use to dissect, knowledge and facts and look at arguments correctly.
Okay. So can we go through those a little more?
Yes, we can definitely go through those one by one.
What was the first one?
All right, metaphysics is definitely the first branch of philosophy.
Right.
Which deals with what is real. What is reality? And it deals with all kinds of concepts like the nature of existence, the nature of space and time, the nature of the soul, the study of being in general.
So how is that different from physics?
Well, physics actually branched off of metaphysics. So metaphysics started out with Aristotle, and then eventually, it was just the study of nature. That's how Aristotle initially laid it out. And then, they used that as a way to study nature for, the better part of 2,000 years until about the 1700s when, modern physics came out, and then it branched into modern physics. And then we started delineating metaphysics into all the different fields of study, basically. So it's like metaphysics kind of turned into biology and psychology and all the other fields of study that we have.
So it's not a separate thing now?
No, they've never been separate. It all stems from itself. It's like all the fields of study that we have that are modern fields of study all stem from metaphysical thinking and metaphysics. Yeah, which is, that's like what the Enlightenment was and stuff. And it was like the resurgence of, philosophical thinking from the ancient Greeks or whatever, which like brought us out of the Dark Ages. So
it's not metaphysics in the sense that physics is the structure of the universe, so metaphysics is the structure of the structure. It's not like that.
No, not really.
Right.
Metaphysics was just the study of reality in general, or just how to look at reality. Basically, what is real? What's
So,
there?
so that distinction still exists, and are there metaphysicists and that sort of thing?
I mean, yeah, I would say, if you're like a theoretical physicist, you're operating in the sphere of metaphysics for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're trying to come up with some kind of, philosophical view of reality or whatever, and then trying to like apply mathematics to it to prove it or whatever.
right. And so, how does that relate to philosophy?
I mean, philosophy is at the root of all of it.
Mm.
I mean,
At the root
especially
of,
with metaphysics, because, what is reality? You have to use that as a premise for every other kind of argument for anything, right? Like,
right.
say you're studying biology, you have to like fundamentally lay out what your premises are about biology. It's like, okay, we have a heart and lungs and we have cells and we have all these things. And then you can, understand that better. But you can't understand it without the basic premise laid out. And that's kind of what metaphysics did.
Right.
And a lot of people said metaphysics was dead after it, spawned classical physics because it was like, well, now we can understand nature and reality through the sphere of like science. And so we don't need metaphysics anymore necessarily. And like a lot of people thought once you branched everything off into all these different fields of study, it was like, well, metaphysics was kind of dead because we can now study nature in like a more precise lens or whatever. So,
But we still need that holistic integration.
yeah, I'd say we definitely do. And then metaphysics has made a resurgence because it's
Right.
like things like string theory and stuff and like quantum theory.
Yeah.
All this stuff comes from like, metaphysics type stuff, even like relativity and
Yeah.
yeah. So
Would
a
it
lot
just-
of our physics concepts that, turned out to be true, those all stem from like metaphysical philosophical concepts about like the way that reality worked.
Right.
And then they were trying to prove those assertions about reality.
Right. So it's in your head to begin with, but it can be provable, at least, hopefully, in the real world.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Through, reason and the scientific method. And
That's a long step, which kind of speaks to the ethereal nature of metaphysics.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's exploring. Plus, it explores a lot of topics that are like really difficult to prove or sometimes impossible. But I mean, after like things like physics and psychology and neurology came out, then people were like, oh, well, you can prove everything materialistically. So it's like, metaphysics is dead. Like eventually, we're just gonna, figure out that the soul is this materialistic thing, and
Right.
and then there'll be no point in even asking questions about the soul anymore, or like consciousness or things like that, or we'll nail down reality to the point where it's like we can prove reality, or we can prove what happens after death, or some of these metaphysical concepts we still have are metaphysical questions that we have not answered yet.
Right.
Still exist. So it's like,
And they're coming
metaphysics
back.
is not dead.
Yeah, it's coming back.
Definitely not dead. There's still a bunch of answers that we don't have that science still has like difficulty answering.
It's because science isn't the end all be all, and metaphysics kind of proves that,
Yeah.
or at least the need for that framing and that sort of interpretation, that kind of big picture integration. I mean, that's what theoretical physicists, metaphysicians, I guess, if that's even a term, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
They're learning a lot of particulars and then using that to integrate into a new whole, or elucidate some part of the whole that's already there. Cool. So what's the next one?
Epistemology, which is how do we know what we know?
Yeah, so it's a study of the system of knowing.
Yeah.
Your epistemology is your system of knowing.
Yeah.
So can we give an example of that?
Well, I mean, our current system of knowing now is like the scientific method, for sure.
So that alone should help kind of prove my hobby horse point that I want to get across here, is that scientific method is just one epistemology out of many.
Yeah, it's true. It's like the scientific method can't like, I don't know, prove the crunchiness of an apple or
Right.
I don't know.
Or what love is, or how consciousness works, or if there is a soul, or one could argue necessarily how to live a good life.
Yeah.
Or at least to get to that would be very complicated with lots and lots of data and proofs.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots and lots of studies.
Yeah, and epistemology uses a lot of, like evidence, like scientific studies from the past or whatever is how you'll come up with an epistemology of something. You're like, okay, we know this about reality because of this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you'll make a metaphysical claim about reality, and then you'll back it up with epistemology and be like, okay, this is how we know this thing is true.
Right.
This is how we know the knowledge that we have about this topic holds up or whatever. Here's all the scientific studies backing it up. Here's all the experience we've had with this thing, and here's the proof. Kind of.
Right. Well, that is our kind of Socratic kind of way, which is a particular epistemology, right?
Yeah.
And that evolved into the scientific method.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the things like, yeah, deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning.
Right. So that we can get to that. So,
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later. But
so that's, I think for me, that's kind of enough to, because epistemology, you're like, what the heck is that? And so it's like enough to kind of define it.
yeah, just think with epistemology, think, how do we know what we know? That's what epistemology looks at.
Right. What's that framework that we use to achieve knowledge?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like a meta superstructure that we all kind of subconsciously just use.
Yeah, paradigm. It's like
Yeah.
the paradigm that you use to view the world through or whatever.
Totally. And theoretically, other cultures and other people could fundamentally have a different epistemology,
Oh, absolutely.
and therefore they would see the world differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like their way of knowing could be totally different. Like
Mhm.
with a lot of Eastern traditions, like their way of knowing is different. Or with like religious context, like their way of knowing is different than through the scientific method or whatever. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where it gets into like realism versus relativism, as far as like
Mm.
as far as metaphysics goes.
What
'Cause
is real and what is relative?
Yeah, well, it's like, is there one real view of reality, or are there multiple views of reality? Like, is there one objective truth to reality, or are there multiple truths to reality?
Mm.
So that's definitely like an old ontological question.
Oh, well, that's another term. Is that on the list?
Yeah, ontology is a branch of metaphysics, which
Okay.
literally translates to just the study of being.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Just the fact that we're here and all that.
Yeah, but it's
The
more
nature
like,
of being.
yeah, it's just studying the nature of being. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at something ontologically, you're studying like the nature
And-
of its reality.
If I'm not mistaken, Buddhism is an ontology.
Yeah.
It's its own specific thing.
Yeah, it's its own specific branch of metaphysics.
Right. And so there's different ontologies that you can kind of experiment with and see what speaks true to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And all right, so what's next?
All right. So, yeah, then we go into value theory, which is broken down into ethics and aesthetics. And value theory is also known as axiology, and I know these terms are crazy, and they're it's a lot to take in, but hopefully we can simplify it. But axiology or value theory is just, us assigning value to concepts. So, like I said, those are broken down into ethics and aesthetic philosophy. So with ethics, it's like, how do we value interpersonal connection? It's like, how do we value our place in society? How do we live a moral life? All those things
Uh-huh.
fall under value theory, which then, those would be ethical questions. But then value theory, as it pertains to like aesthetic philosophy, would be like, how beautiful is this crystal here? It's more beautiful than that crystal. Or, how you value the beauty of certain things.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, ethics is pretty straightforward to understand. Yeah, which is just what is a value? How do we value things?
Which clearly most of the philosophers were very concerned with.
Yeah.
How to live a good life. I think that's honestly at the root of most of my searching is perhaps this subconscious desire for wholeness again. And what better way than to understand the way that we think and the way that the world works.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then just how to live a moral life and stuff. Yeah, every single philosopher is basically written about ethics and
And can you devise it from whole cloth, or do you need help from the past, so to speak? The shoulders of giants, that whole thing.
Um, yeah, shoulders of giants probably.
Well, clearly the philosophers build on who came before them, and while also trying to critique and push it forward.
Yeah, philosophy is the most iterative process ever. It's just like science. Someone will posit something, and then the next philosopher will come along and be like,
Yeah.
"You are completely wrong," and then
Right.
the next
It's
philosopher will
almost
come along and be
comical.
like, "You are completely wrong," and it'll just be counter argument on top of counter argument on top of counter argument until eventually, hopefully, some like truth pops out of there somewhere.
Well, it does. That's the beautiful thing. I remember having this moment when I first started really studying it and reading. I was like, are they just arguing for the sake of argument? And do they just have like these personal vendettas against each other? But no, it's like that literally is the process. That's the Hegel's dialectic. It's just back and forth. And you're talking about the true. Can the true be known? And I think it can be through this Socratic method. This dialogical method where we present an idea and rip it apart and come up with a new idea over and over and over again.
Yeah, yep, that's definitely how you advance knowledge. This is why it's important to not be like dogmatic in thinking and to listen to multiple ideas and new concepts.
Because it's literally prerequisite for the whole fucking system to work at all.
Yeah, for the
You have to
advancement of knowledge,
question.
you have to question everything.
Yeah.
Like that's the point of philosophy. Question everything.
Or try to prove yourself wrong in the sense that you take it to its logical conclusion, and if it's in fact false, it's going to prove itself wrong
Yeah.
somewhere along the way. And then you go, damn it, now I need to start over. But that's epistemological humility. I think is just know that you don't know, and know that our keyhole to the universe is very narrow, and all we're trying to do is widen it.
Yeah, and I don't know shit. I will definitely admit
most
that.
of us, most of us don't. But I think there's a big fallacy around, professionalizing philosophy. I think it should be for the everyman, and it should be part of our everyday discourse more and more. What conversation do you want to have around the water bubbler? Is it talking trash about Nancy and HR, or is it talking about the deeper aspects of the universe and how to live a good life? And I think philosophy has taken a back seat, the humanities in general, and it's gotten kind of vilified and frowned upon. But I think, like we talked about, I think it's starting to come back. It's a renaissance of philosophy, hopefully.
Yeah, I would hope that it's starting to make at least a bit of a resurgence. I
It
mean,
seems like
philosophy never went away, though. I mean, yeah, like I was talking about earlier, like once I deep dove into this, it was like, oh yeah, for any kind of PhD research paper, it's like you're using philosophy, like a lot of it, as just a prerequisite for writing your dissertation. So it's like,
Right.
you have to come up with an ontological view of whatever you're researching or whatever. So you need to like state what's real, what's going on in reality or whatever. And then you need to state how you know what's real, which that would be the epistemological view of the world. So you need to state both those things when you're writing a research paper. And then after that, you can come up with a methodology for how you're going to answer whatever question you're seeking. And then you come up with the methods for conducting that research. So it's like, that's like the hierarchy of how you need to do a college dissertation paper.
Yeah.
But, or just like, philosophy in general. That's the way that it should be done.
Right. So.
And then it advances knowledge, because then you've taken
clearly.
a concept and you've gone to you stated all the assumptions about it, and then you're trying to discover something new about it. And this is kind of the core of the scientific method, as far as like the philosophy of the scientific method.
Yeah. Right. Which is interesting how they're so deeply connected right from the beginning, and how philosophy is out of the limelight. And I would argue that good philosophy requires both a narrow focus and a wide berth of information and perspective. And that is part of the issue with the scientific method, is it's really only good at narrow focus.
Yeah.
which allows us to make incredible progress, but it makes it very disjointed and hard to link it. I wonder if that's part of the reason why modern philosophy is not as apparent, because technology and progress has made it so complex that it's incredibly hard to associate and to link all this stuff together.
Yeah. Well, I think philosophy is more just operating in the background at this point.
I mean, because I've gone searching for like who are the great modern philosophies and the philosophers, and to a certain extent, you don't know until after the fact, right?
Yeah.
But there is kind of this. I'm probably way ignorant on this, and you guys can rip me apart in the comments, but it seems like there's not as much going on as, say, certainly during the Enlightenment or like the early 19th century, you know? Kind of
Yeah.
similar to like classical music, like where are the Mozarts and the Bachs? Where are the Nietzsches and the Hegels and the Kants? Or are they around and we just don't know about them?
Well, like I said, I think they tried to reduce philosophy down to this like materialistic view of reality or whatever, where it's
Oh,
just
it got fractured.
yeah, everything got turned into this like straight up cause effect, like materialistic, we're made of atoms and cells view of the world. And
Yeah.
I think after that, it killed a bunch of different kinds of philosophy because a lot of philosophy, especially back in the day before we had these scientific discoveries, was like trying to make assertions about these things. But then we answered the questions, like
Mm,
they had these fundamental questions about reality, but then they wound up
yeah.
answering a shitload of them. So it accomplished its goals, which is like
Yeah.
once philosophy accomplishes
Right.
its goals, then I guess it's no longer
But don't
useful.
you think that's a fallacy? Like we can never fully finish philosophy
I mean,
because of our
no,
because of our narrow keyhole. I mean, I know this whole theory about scientific progress and the fact in the 19th century they were like pretty sure that we've like figured out most of the things about the universe, right? And then dun
yeah.
dun dun, along comes dark energy and dark matter, and it's like, oh, we don't know anything about the universe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a thing that happened. And then you have to change your entire philosophical lens about physics. Like,
Right, right.
you have a breakthrough in, well, I guess what was that a mathematical breakthrough that led to a philosophical breakthrough, or how did that work out?
Uh,
Did
I
the math come first, or did the
I don't know.
philosophy come first? Either
Probably
way,
both. I think it's kind of Einstein talks about it more as a philosophical thing that was born out of all the math that he did.
yeah.
You
And then
do.
the mathematicians wound up proving it or something.
This is what I'm talking about. He didn't realize general relativity in the moment of narrow focus. No, no, no. It comes when you're sleeping or when you're walking in the park, because that's when your right brain engages and that's when you integrate.
Yeah.
I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and you probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but um, for the listeners listening, I forgot to kind of preface this conversation by saying a lot of my metaphysics revolves around this dualistic thinking proposed by Ian McGilchrist in The Master and His Emissary, in the hemispheric nature of our brain. And his hypothesis is that we're left brain dominant. And the left brain is very good at this narrow focus, but the right brain is what's needed in Einstein's moment of revelation. And I would argue probably most philosophers' great moments of revelation. It's that aha moment, where everything clicks together. And that I do think happens when you shift from a narrow focus to a kind of more embodied, holistic focus, which is the value to all of these embodied spiritual practices like meditation, yoga, even rock climbing or jumping on your damn trampoline. Whatever you got to do to disconnect from the focus and integrate, your physiology is actually kicking in and allowing you to understand. So, anyway,
Yeah. All right, yeah. Let's finish off these branches of philosophy here, I guess. All right. So we got to ethics. Yeah, aesthetic philosophy. That's just the study of beauty, which
oh,
the
the
pe-
good, the beautiful, and the true.
yeah, people did write some interesting things about beauty and art. So there is a wealth of literature on that, but we will do a deep dive into that one later. But the question of what is beautiful is definitely like an interesting question.
Yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, but what makes art beautiful? Like,
Right.
yeah, a lot of that stuff goes into the philosophy of art too.
Mm.
which many cultures have put a huge emphasis on. So it's important.
I have a lot to say
It's an
about
important
that.
philosophical concept. One that like I think we probably overlook a lot in the United States, except for like on a
Yes.
very visceral like Instagram model type level.
Yeah, that's part of it. But you're right. It's kind of a virtual pathological way.
Yeah, as opposed to it being like, like Bali or whatever, where there's just like art everywhere as part of their
Mm.
like religious
Or
practice because
Europe.
like they take the aesthetic, like it's ingrained in their philosophy.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
think aesthetics have taken a major backseat. Our
Yeah.
architecture is a perfect example of that. This brutalism architecture we have.
Yeah, it's pretty
Nothing,
rough.
very few buildings, modern buildings in the U.S. are beautiful, except for key noticeable, churches and stuff like that. But um, beauty is terrifying. I think people are scared of beauty because it calls to a deeper part of you, and it calls you to really try to manifest something beautiful. And I think artists and musicians deal with this every day. This kind of fear around how do I do that, knowing that it has to be done, and then you do it. And again, I think you're tapping into this more big picture, intuitive pattern recognition, right? I think
Yeah.
philosophy and art are similar in that sense. It's pattern recognition.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of philosophy as one of the humanities, one of the arts, perhaps distinctively separate from STEM, from more of the hard sciences.
Yeah, it's the art of learning.
It takes an actual. I wonder if this is it. I wonder if it actually takes the left and the right brain individual who has a good balance, who is creative and holistic and also narrowly focused and technically capable, right? That's the balance that we're trying to strike now. And that's probably why philosophy has died off and why why it's starting to come back out of necessity to restore balance.
Yeah, plus, like, especially people who are agnostic and stuff, it's like you need to ask questions about how to live a good life if you don't have religious background, because I definitely don't.
Right.
So it's like it is important to ask moral and ethical questions. It's important to ask questions about beauty, the nature of reality, the nature of like how you know what you know.
Right.
Like all these things are fairly important, but like we take them for granted all the time.
Right.
So this is why philosophy is important. We need to understand why we think the way that we do, and maybe definitely question our own thinking. You should always be doing that, and that's what philosophy tries to teach you how to do. It's take yourself out of the equation and just look at the world with no biases and without your own like perspective in the way, and just
Right.
try to like objectively look at reality.
And try to get back to first principles or bedrock in the sense that if you have a particular heuristic or tack that you're taking, you can take it to its logical conclusion and then actually get down to truth.
Yeah, definitely. By having like logical, sound arguments for why you believe what you do,
Which is
and
hard
why you
though,
believe
right?
what you believe, like.
Because you got to keep defining terms. It's this almost infinitely regressive, or sometimes it seems that way, but
Yeah, and until eventually, well, I don't know.
until you hit the aha moment. That's how
Yeah,
it's
it's
been for me.
true.
It's been this grind. Reading Hegel and Kant was like a grind until things start to click, more and more and more.
Yeah, I mean, there's PhD programs where you just study Hegel or Kant. Like
You could just take one sentence.
that's all you do for 4 years is you
Yeah,
just read Hegel or Kant,
right.
and then you get a PhD for it, like in
Hmm.
philosophy. So that's like a thing. Like that's how complicated and how much they wrote. I
Well,
mean, which
so
is an insane amount of writing, but they wrote about everything.
it's immensely useful because of this perspective. Each one of them has their unique perspective. And this is why I love modern science and the PhD program. I don't ever want to come across as anti science. All I say is I think we need more of a balance. But that particular way of knowing, man, it gets shit done.
Yeah, and thinking from a different, like, metaphysical perspective and questioning the nature of reality and stuff. I mean, look at people like Nikola Tesla. He
Right.
had some crazy philosophical views about, like, the nature of reality and stuff, and look at what he invented as a result of it. So it's like,
Yeah.
paradigm shifts can still occur in things like physics because of metaphysics and because of philosophy.
And they come from those fringe creative people, I would argue, a lot of the times.
Yeah, it's true.
Because if something's going to come from outside the box, then clearly it's got to come from someone outside. Or, if the system isn't working, then clearly it may need to come from outside the box.
Yeah.
There is room for the creative in this whole game. I think philosophy is one of those places.
Yeah. And then one of the last branches, political philosophy. And everyone knows what
Great.
political philosophy is.
My favorite. No, we talked about how I was deeply affected by reading Russian authors and reading about what happened in Nazi Germany and just geopolitics in general. I find really fascinating. And obviously, it trickles down into every aspect of our lives, including philosophy. And some of the great philosophers were political philosophers. So I want to embrace this new way of thinking where philosophy or politics isn't a bad word. And
Yeah, it's an important question. I mean,
It's an
political
important
philosophy
question.
just asks how do we govern ourselves? Like
Right.
that's a fundamentally a pretty important question, I would say. Like,
and a hard question.
yeah, because we
One of the
haven't we
hardest.
haven't gotten it right yet, so
No.
we have to keep asking this question.
Iteration, and I would argue the American system is far from perfect, but one of the best iterations we've had, which is why it's had almost worldwide adoption. This democratic capitalist thing we got going on,
Yeah, but it's got its problems too.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk in depth about
Yeah,
political
we should
philosophy later.
We should do a whole episode on political philosophy. I'd love to reread Marx and do some note taking and
Yeah, we can break down all the different government types and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like, yeah.
I do have a lot to say about that, and I am pro-American, pro-socialist, pro-democratic, with a very balanced conservative, liberal divide. It's a beautiful divide we have because it provides stability. That's all I'll say about that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely a democratic socialist, but I'm just under the view that, yeah, government should be there to regulate corporations and not be there to regulate people.
And
That's-
to monopolize violence, otherwise shit gets out of hand.
Yeah, yeah, and there's been way too much emphasis on regulating people as opposed to regulating the corporations that are hurting people. So, yeah,
Yeah, typical power.
That's where my thing's wrong with the government.
Well, I feel like this is a perennial, like we talked about, it's bigger than just capitalism. This is a perennial human problem, is the consolidation of power by the few.
Yeah, we'll get into Karl Marx later, though.
Yeah.
And neo-Marxist thinking, yeah, which is mainly the struggle between those who have and those who don't have.
Yeah, and then our rampant postmodern neo-Marxist leaning, which I don't say as a pejorative, by the way.
Yeah.
I think
I think it's one of the most fundamental political issues, period. I think Karl Marx was right about a whole lot
Right.
of things, but
we're in a different sort of tyranny, and I think most people would agree with that.
yeah. All right, yeah, the last last part of geez, this did take a while to get through, but these are complicated words, huh? These are loaded terms. All right, yeah, logic's the last branch of philosophy, and that just deals with how to argue and stuff and how to come
Pause.
up with Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right, logic. Yay, logic.
We're back. We're back. Back in action.
Logic's the toolbox that you use to understand the world. So
Can we define it?
it's how do we reason? So, yeah, that's pretty much the definition of logic.
We should have looked up the etymology. I should have done more homework.
I mean, logic. I took a whole class on logic in college. It is complicated. There's a whole. You can map any sentence and look at it and be like, okay, or paragraph and be like, okay, are these premises true? Then the conclusion's true. Like you can point out logical fallacies in
If
anything.
then.
You could deconstruct like entire text. There's been like a person who deconstructed the entire Bible sentence by sentence, looking for and paragraph by paragraph using logic, looking for logical fallacies. Fucking
Yeah.
crazy shit.
That's a fool's errand because I'm sure there's many.
Yeah, exactly. So logic is how you make assertions and claims about the nature of reality. So
Okay.
yeah,
And
So
then there's
typically it's, if premise A is true and premise B is true, then conclusion C is true. So
right. Yeah.
yeah, that's one example of a logical, argument.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so that's one. What is that one called? I
That's called deductive reasoning.
Okay, so then there's different types of logic.
Yeah, I mean, these are the really basic ones: is deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, and abductive reasoning. But yeah, with deductive reasoning, it's like the premises are true, and the conclusion is true. And there's so many examples of that I could give. But
Which
let's do a basic one. I smoke weed every day is premise one. Premise two is if you smoke weed every day, you're a pothead. The conclusion is I am a pothead.
Yeah, but those false premises.
Yeah, exactly. And if some of them are false premises, then then it's not a valid statement.
So that to me speaks to an inherent weakness in that logical structure, because it's nearly impossible to prove that your premises are in fact true.
Yeah, but this goes
Which
down to the
is,
difference between knowledge and beliefs.
oh, well, that's, what do you mean?
There's a big difference between knowledge and beliefs.
Oh, I
Beliefs are
totally
something
agree.
that you think you know, and knowledge is something that you can prove.
I would argue that beliefs are what you act out.
Well, no, beliefs are just your assertion about something, but
Well, that's
knowledge
how,
is backing up your assertion. So, yeah.
right, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Belief is like the projection in your head.
Here, let me flip through some notes here. Oh, yeah, knowledge is a justified true belief. So, yeah, in order
Right.
to have knowledge about something, you hold a belief and then you justify it via.
Pause. And we're back.
All right, we're good. All right, so knowledge, yeah, right. So knowledge is a justified true belief. That's like the, philosophical definition of what knowledge is.
Mm.
So, you can hold a belief or whatever, but you need to justify it with a bunch of like evidence to back it up, and then that claim is true. So,
Right.
yeah.
So that is taking the propositional and manifesting it in reality by doing in the real world.
Yeah, and experiencing, and then being able to
Experimentation.
repeat with experiments, yeah, and be
Right.
like, okay, this apple's red every time, or whatever.
So again, back to my neurological argument here. You're taking the particular and then you're integrating.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And this logical process is doing that over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, plus we need some way to like, ground claims in reality or whatever. So like deductive
Right.
reasoning is actually the most straightforward version of reasoning that we have, because it's like, okay, if you can prove that both of the premises are true and that they're connected to the conclusion, then like the conclusion's true. So it's like for, things like basic physics problems and stuff, it's like, this is how we're able to make assertions about the future and stuff.
Yeah, and send people to the moon.
Yeah, and send people to the moon and do all kind, design microchips and
Yeah.
all the crazy stuff that we've ever made, all the stuff we're recording this on, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that was using tons of deductive reasoning and experimentation to advance technology and knowledge and human knowledge.
And so what's inductive?
Inductive reasoning is using past experience to predict future behavior. So that's like probabilistic analysis. So yeah.
Past experience to predict future behavior.
Yeah. So again, that would again be like a physics problem. But
So rather than it being in your head first, it starts with the data first.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it starts with past experience first to draw conclusions about the future.
Oh no, so it doesn't start with data. This is all inductive. This is in your head. It's kind of what I'm speaking to. It's that intuitive kind of, right? Or am I understanding this wrong?
Well, it's using just like I said, past experience to predict future behavior. So it's like,
Yeah. So if you bring up some example of something to me, and I've had past experience of it, I kind of link together all of those disparate associations in my brain, and then I come up with an conclusion
well, here,
based on that structure of reasoning.
Let me give you a good A, B, C premise conclusion example with inductive reasoning. So it's like, okay, I slept. Premise A: I slept with a hooker in Mexico 2 weeks ago. Premise B: I now have herpes. And then the conclusion is the hooker gave me herpes. That's using inductive reasoning.
Right.
You're making an assertion about what happened based on past experience. And your past experience is that if you sleep with a prostitute and don't use protection, there's a good chance you'll get an STD. So you did that thing, and now you have an STD. So you can come to the conclusion that it was the hooker that gave you the STD.
Okay. So you really confused me with your example, but now I'm like in Thailand with some dark, shady alley. But anyways,
Well, I wanted to make it funny.
back to reality.
But yeah, that's using inductive reasoning. Again, these are like all logical arguments like this. You can map them out when you write them out. It's just like doing math, but for sentences. It's kind of
Yeah.
that's basically how you break logic down. And then you just look at every single paragraph and be like, okay, do all of these assertions, are they true? Are they false? Are they making false, do the premises not match the conclusion? All that jazz.
Yeah. What I realized by learning about these structures is that it's literally the way we all think, and it's why we think the way we think.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, these philosophers are kind of pushing it forward and creating new structures, or at least elucidating what's already there.
Yeah.
We use these forms of reasoning.
Yeah, we use
all
them.
day,
We use them every day, all day, with every single decision that you make. Like,
it's not really particular to philosophers. That was a big breakthrough for me. Was just how kind of germane and everyday it can be once you understand how it works. It's quite complicated to get to the point where you understand how it works.
yeah. Here, we'll do another one with deductive reasoning. It's like I showed up late for work today. My boss will fire me if I show up late to work, and then conclusion, my boss fired me or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's like very straightforward deductive reasoning. Now, the inductive version of that would be like, I showed up late, or I'm going to show up late to work today. It's like, that's premise one or whatever. And then premise two is, my boss told me that if I showed up late to work again, he might fire me. And then conclusion is like, my boss might fire me.
Again, yeah. So it's first person in your head, kind of projecting.
Yeah, I guess
That's
that
why
wasn't
it's
the best
inductive.
example. I should have given even better
Yeah,
examples.
I think I follow, and that means that probably most of our audience follows. And I'm sorry, guys, we're terrible at this. But honestly, I'm quite bored with these terms, but I think it's important to get them out.
Yeah, once we discuss all the terms, then we'll get into like we'll be less in the weeds in the future.
Yeah, and these
At
terms
least that's kind of my hope.
yes. I would hope as we go, similar to the scientific method, we get a narrower and narrower focus, which requires better and better understanding of the terms and how they relate to each other. And the best way to do that is just to keep going over it. We're circling around what's really going on there.
Yeah, it's true. Well, and because this is a podcast on trying to understand like the philosophy of philosophy, it's like it's trying to understand the way that we think and the way that we draw conclusions and the way that we go about like understanding the world.
Yeah. And participate in the process in real time.
Yeah. So we're in the process of gaining more understanding about the world.
Yes.
But,
It's the only.
but these terms are complicated. I mean, when you really start breaking concepts down to their like most fundamental component parts, like things get way more complicated.
Mhm.
Like that's just intrinsically how it goes. Like
Yeah.
some of our words and terms are so loaded that like we just take it for granted in the
It's-
English language. But like
It's a very messy system of definition language.
yeah, it's true. I mean, especially when you have terms that you aren't using all the time in daily like speech.
Or philosophy in different languages. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Not exactly the same words in English as German.
yeah, or ancient Greek, like it's all a
Sure.
yeah, translation into English and then they miss stuff or stuff gets hard to interpret. English isn't a very complete language either. It's like a trade language, so it kind of lacks depth. I mean,
Yeah, it really does.
yeah, so there's like stuff we don't have words for in the English language that they do in like German and they do
Well,
in
honestly,
other languages.
part of what I hope we can do, if this blossoms, let's say, is come up with new terms, right? That's kind of how you push it forward. Think about it. Did existentialism exist before? No, that it wasn't even a term.
Yeah,
So you invent words and you invent terms and flesh them out, only if it's justified.
yeah,
I think it'll come quite naturally if it does.
yeah.
And most likely we'll realize that someone else smarter than us thought of it first.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Progress. What's next?
Oh, abductive reasoning is like the final kind of reasoning.
Abductive.
Yeah, and that one you just eliminate impossible conclusions until only the possible conclusion remains. So it's just like process of elimination type thinking.
Of course. How you
Yeah.
find your keys.
Yeah, exactly. You just search everywhere until eventually you find those fuckers.
It's always in the last place you look.
Yeah, because then you stop looking. It's very obvious. Why would you keep looking if you found them? Like, of course. Like, duh. But yes, that's process of elimination type thinking.
Which
So,
is,
abductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning is you can prove the premises are true and the conclusion's true. It's very straightforward. Inductive reasoning, you're making an assertion about the future based on past experience. And then abductive reasoning, you're making an assertion by eliminating all the other possible conclusions. So
Occam's razor.
yeah, so those are like the three main types of like argument.
Actually, not really Occam's.
I mean, there's way more than that when you get down to like pure logical arguments and stuff, but like that's just like kind of a brief overview. Yeah, what else do we want to cover here? So yeah, why philosophy? Yeah, for you. Why'd you like philosophy, Roy?
Oh God, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, I know.
I suppose I got to go back to the beginning, but sometime in my late adolescence, I became obsessed with knowing things, knowing about the universe. So I read lots of books on physics and cosmology. And somewhere along the line, I realized that there is a system of thought, and there's this whole kind of mirror and lens that we look through, and part of that is psychology, and part of that is philosophy. And I've always been interested in big questions. I prefer meta conversation as opposed to narrow conversation. And so I just dove deep. I went to the thrift store and I found all these classic books on all the greats. It was like texts on Spinoza and Kant and Hegel. And like, I got like 13 of these books and just brought them home. And I didn't read all of them, you know, it's pretty dense stuff.
Yeah.
But that's really what sparked it for me. And then back when we were growing out in Dexter, I dove really, really deep with podcasts and audiobooks. I would just work in the field all day and really dig deep into philosophy. And somewhere around there, I started making progress. And it wasn't just reading it for the sake of reading it. I was really starting to understand it. And those aha moments was so addicting and wonderful. And I really just started chasing that whole cloth for a long time. And it coincided with my spiritual awakening and my psychological development, a la Jordan Peterson. So all these things kind of coalesced into a very powerful transformation, and philosophy was absolutely a part of that. And I've always wanted to be a part of it. That's why I'm so thrilled to do this podcast, because one of my dreams is really absolutely to at least participate. And that's what I think philosophy is. I think it's happening right now. It's the participation with ideas and the active platonic dialogue of hashing out things and disagreeing or agreeing
Yeah.
and working through ideas. And then I see a general wholesale sickness that has to do around a meaning crisis, and clearly philosophy has a role to play in that. I think we need a resurgence of Neoplatonism and Stoicism and hard rigor around how you think and how you act. There's discipline there, you know,
Yeah.
and that part of that discipline is philosophy. But there's also this beautiful, again, it's in the word, wisdom and love. I mean, there's this like beautiful flowering aspect to philosophy that I really enjoy. It's super similar to my spiritual development. There's like this unfolding where things fit together more and more, and it
Yeah.
just grows and grows and grows, and that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what about you?
Oh God. Well, this story's gonna get brutal. I got into philosophy when I was 20 because I needed some answers about tough questions in life.
So, wait, when did you start your undergraduate degree in philosophy? You were 20?
Well, I switched majors probably when I was
Oh,
21. But when I was 20, half my family was killed in a plane crash. So both my sisters and my dad died in one day. And I had a crisis of meaning for sure. A very, very real slap in the face crisis of meaning. So I was originally going to school for psychology. And after that, yeah, I took one existentialism class after my family died, and it opened my eyes to philosophy. And I was never religious growing up, so it gave some answers and stuff, and at least gave me some solace in a really, really, really difficult time in my life. So it was extremely helpful. Yeah, existentialism.
did you
That's what got me into it really hard.
did you have a philosophical leaning before that?
I mean, no, not particularly. I was very,
You're athletic.
yeah,
You're into wrestling and stuff.
yeah, I was into wrestling always. But as far as like a general philosophical view on life, I didn't really have one necessarily at that point.
Interesting. It
Yeah,
was,
because I wasn't religious growing up. I didn't have that kind of background. Like I
yeah,
was just like very, very materialistic view of the world, I guess. I just thought everything was just, brutal causality and there was just no meaning to anything. It was a pretty nihilistic view of the world actually. Like there's
yeah,
just nothing happens after death. Like it's just randomness happening and that's it. So
sure.
but after studying after existentialism and stuff and reading some beautiful existentialist writings and stuff, especially about things like suffering and loss and things like that, it helped quite a bit, and like I said, gave me quite a bit of solace. And then I just pursued it really hard and just kept taking more and more philosophy classes, and then just I loved it. Like I loved doing the coursework. I loved like the discussion sections. It was just, yeah, those aha moments are amazing.
Mm,
It's such dense reading though. It's so difficult. So we're gonna get a lot of this stuff super wrong.
yeah.
Like I guarantee I'm gonna get a lot of this stuff wrong a lot of the time, but that's okay.
We're taking a brief pass overview, very cursory, very shallow overview.
Yeah, like extremely complicated topics.
It's got to go deeper, and I'm sure it will.
Yeah, we'll cover it surface level and then start getting deeper, I guess.
So I just wanted to comment because it was almost like philosophy was forced upon you.
Yeah, almost to a certain extent. Like, I just needed answers really badly about life and death. So I wanted to read what every single person had basically written about life and death and
And I just want to
meaning.
comment. Do you know what other philosopher was greatly traumatized, which led to arguably creative genius?
I don't know.
A whole bunch of them.
Yeah, like
But
most of them?
yeah, but Nietzsche in particular, you know. So
Yeah, I was gonna say Nietzsche.
he struggled perhaps more than anybody. So I think it speaks to the utilitarian aspect of philosophy. In the beginning, I thought, are they just arguing for the sake of argument? Is this just verbal wordplay? But no, it is very useful.
Yeah, they're thought exercises. It's supposed to flex your brain
Well, no,
muscle.
I just mean in the application to because you derive some solace on how to deal with your tragedy.
Yeah,
This is
definitely.
this is directly useful.
Yeah, because you
It's
just
not
can't
just
avoid tragedy, so.
it's just not just for people in the ivory tower, I really think we need everyday philosophers.
Yeah, yeah, we do. Plus, yeah, it just gave me a lot of solace. I mean, eventually my philosophical views were kind of combined with, like Newtonian physics and stuff, because it's just like, and kind of some Eastern beliefs too, because I think the Hindus at least got it right with like reincarnation and stuff, at least as far as like Newtonian physics goes, because you can't create or destroy matter or
Yeah, it's
energy,
funny
and we're
how
all made
they
of matter and energy, so
it's
can't
funny how
create
they
or
got that
destroy us,
right.
right?
Yeah, they got that right well before him.
Yeah, so that's at least my philosophical view as it stands. I mean that we're all just 13 billion-year-old stardust,
Yeah.
and that's it. That lines up with what we know about the physical reality of the world.
And
So
it's causal, right? I mean, the Big Bang happened, and literally everything that's happening right now is a result of that.
yeah,
So
and
there's this inevitability to the whole thing that's kind of brutal, but also true.
yeah, but I don't know. The fact that you can't create or destroy matter or energy, I think that should give some people some solace, right?
Oh,
Because, I
definitely.
mean, right? Like that,
Yeah.
just that one fundamental part of reality, I mean, it's like, okay, that means that we've been here forever. It almost makes death way less of just a scary thing.
Yeah, well, you're not afraid of not being anything for eternity before you're born. So why are you scared of not being anything for eternity after you're born?
Exactly. And these are the important philosophical questions to ask.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of the memento mori. I'm a big fan of reminding ourselves that life is precious and short and that we all are going to die. And that isn't depressing and dark. That is real and rational
Yeah.
and useful because then you can really enjoy and take advantage. When I thought, do I want to make the trip out here to podcast today? Part of that rationale behind it was life is fleeting and what do you want to do, and if there's any resistance, get over it and do the thing that you want to do. Podcasting is definitely one of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm enjoying it immensely.
Yeah, my brain tingles. It's really fun.
I got to get through the nerves and stuff. Just hopefully the content matter isn't too boring, but I don't know. We got to lay out some kind of like framework for how we view reality, especially if we're going to have like a philosophy channel.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you need that. So hopefully these terms are a little bit less scary after this.
Yeah, that process of defining terms is really important, and we're going to have to do that constantly. I'm actually really fascinated by the meaning of words, and I think that's part of the reason why, because it really helps you understand these deep, complex ideas if you actually understand where the words come from. It gives you so much insight, and a lot of times the words are way deeper than you realize, like religion meaning togetherness. Who would have thought that? No one ever knew that.
Yeah.
So it changes the perspective of terms.
Yeah, especially metaphysical terms. I mean, they're very, very loaded.
Yeah, and
Like,
and philosophers disagree about what the terms mean, so you have to define that beforehand. And then I'm hoping that people in the comments will like correct us, and then we can get this kind of communal dialogue going as well.
yes, all the philosophy students that are watching that are way smarter than us,
Yeah,
correct us, please.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, definitely. Although I'm trying really hard. So yeah, I think just hearing all of the different arguments for yeah, life and death was really, really helpful to me. It got me through definitely the roughest time in my life. And yeah, I love philosophy. It's good stuff. It's definitely mental gymnastics.
Mm, most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it just feels like mental masturbation, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, there is a creative play element to it because if you're playing music, for instance, are you not getting something done? Of course you are. But there has to be this kind of free association period. And I do think that that's part of where the joy comes in with philosophy, where you kind of put down the dry analytical stuff and either have a good conversation or just take a walk in the woods and think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those have been some of my biggest revelations have been in the woods after, reading some philosophy podcast or text.
Yeah, and all the people listening, you should also be like doing some push-ups or something right now while listening to this.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Work out.
we'll have it on video and audio, so a lot of people, if they listen on audio, that's certainly how I do it.
While listening to this, either be working out or cleaning, one or the other.
Or just sitting and listening, that's also good.
No, do some push-ups.
Do you have any other notes or?
About philosophy. I mean, no, not too much. I think we got most of it. Yeah, the main point of philosophy, just to drive it home, is to remove yourself from experience, to objectively view the world.
I would argue the other side of that is to participate in the action.
Yeah, but by that I mean
you are a part of the world.
Yeah, but that I mean just to like analyze the world without your own like perspective and bias getting in the way. I mean, this is especially true of things like the scientific method, where it's like you need to totally, ditch your biases, or try to if you're trying to like discover new information.
You can't ditch your biases, but you can become aware of them.
Yeah, well, and just try to look at the world more analytically.
Right.
Yeah, and critically.
But you realize the fundamental paradox of a subject trying to view the world as an object.
Yeah.
We exist interrelationally. We don't exist in a vacuum, isolated.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you're always going to have your sense perception that ties you into this world, and then your memory of it that, creates all these preconceived notions about reality and stuff. Right. But again, this is why it's so important with philosophy to, like, state what your view of reality is before you start making arguments.
Right.
Yeah.
And progress can be made.
Yes, look at how much progress we've made. We're living like kings right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better than kings, probably.
Yeah. Yes. For the most part.
Cool. Well, do you want to keep going, or do you want to wrap it up, or what do you think? Because I know you want to. We could go into the history and touch on some of the greats and stuff.
I will just touch on something that, Plato said about, argument and how to find truth and stuff, which was related to his view of the soul, which is the tripartite soul. So he thought, your soul consisted of a logical part, an emotional part, and then like an animalistic, like physical desire type part. So yeah, I had those decided. So the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive soul. And he's saying that if you want to like argue any point, you need to be operating off of the rational or logical side and ditch your emotions and then ditch your appetitive soul. So
right.
To make good arguments, try to not let emotions get in the way.
Right.
That's a very good point with philosophy. That's what you should definitely also try to do with philosophy. Which is why you should try to ditch your preconceived notions about stuff, because, somebody presents a different argument to some belief that you hold or whatever, and then you get all angry and you won't hear them out. It's not productive.
Like, yeah, we're wired to do that to a certain degree, to take stances and hold them fervently.
Yeah, which is what we're trying to like get people to not do.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we would encourage people to do, is hear people out if they have a different opinion than you. Yeah, especially about things that are like metaphysical concepts. Like,
yeah, hold things tightly, let go lightly.
Yeah.
It's okay to delve deep, but realize that there's way more to the story. Be humble. Rationally humble.
Yeah, and curious. Be more curious about
curiosity
reality.
Is a huge, huge part of it. I would argue all the great philosophers were intensely curious.
Yeah. Yeah, they just kept asking questions until they couldn't get any more answers, basically. And then, boom, start trying to answer those unanswerable questions.
It's actually, I think, a key to a lot of psychological suffering is curiosity.
Yeah.
If you have perseverance, if you have pain, if you have something bothering you, or if you're trying to meditate, if simply becoming curious of the phenomenon completely changes this perspective. It pushes you forward, I think.
Yeah, totally. If we're dealing with suffering and stuff, especially
Right.
psychological suffering, yeah, curiosity is incredibly important.
Yeah, it changes the framing from perhaps victim mentality to uh, um, being able to do it, to being an individual able to take care of the problem. It engages the motivational system, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So just curiosity, good thing.
Yeah, it might have killed cats, but it progressed human society forward.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, always be curious. And don't just dismiss people's viewpoints just because you hold certain beliefs that may or may not be true.
Yeah, yeah. Know that you don't know.
Yeah, know that you know nothing. That is the key to really good philosophy, or to be a really good philosopher. Is just act under the assumption that you know nothing.
Well, yeah.
Uh,
Truth can be known, but there's a good chance that you don't know the whole picture because it's too complex.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's very, very complex. So you have all these shades of gray and all these exceptions. To a
Yeah,
certain degree, I think that's what the philosophers are trying to iron out. They're trying to provide more structure to that, so it's less ambiguous.
yeah,
But to a certain extent, it's trying to put God into a box, which is hilarious. Um, but it's still fundamentally necessary.
yeah.
You got to exist in it, be in it, and then you also have to work with it. There's a healthy balance there.
Yeah, I guess we could end with like the Plato's cave allegory,
Hmm.
which is definitely about discovering the true nature of reality.
Right. So the idea is you're in a cave and there's a wall behind you and there's a fire in the cave which projects shadows onto a wall that you can see. You can't see behind the wall behind you. That's where the real world is. All you see is the wall with the shadows. So the whole point for me at least is that is fundamentally what we experience. We experience the shadows on the wall, and it it's a representation of what's there because the shadow gives you the rough outline of the form of the thing, but it's clearly not the whole picture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, he's talking about the appearance of reality versus actual reality.
Right.
So the shadows on the wall are the appearance. It's what reality appears like. But actual reality will be getting up and stepping outside of the cave and going into the light and seeing the 3D world for what it actually is.
Yeah.
So his thing with philosophy is that as philosophers, we're trying to go from the darkness of the cave into the light,
Mm.
and and discover the true nature of reality.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm pretty sure I'm right on this too is that he actually thinks that we're all just that's the fundamental condition we're in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you can never know the true nature of
Right. Yeah.
reality.
Okay.
Like, yeah, because our
Because of
yeah,
our keyhole
yeah,
nature.
because fundamentally, yeah, the other analogy is like, yeah, you're looking through a keyhole,
Yeah.
in a door or whatever, and you can just see this tiny little frame of the room, but you can't see the whole room. And that's like our perception of reality because we are limited by sense perception. We only have these five senses that hold us to this reality, and that's it. And they can be flawed, they can be tricked, and
Yeah, but so again, it's not that truth can't be known. It's just epistemic humility
yeah,
the whole way.
that we can be wrong. Like
Yeah.
that's the main point. We
Yeah.
can be wrong about anything.
And I think there's power in holding, particularly your hardest set beliefs or knowledge. There's power in holding that stuff lightly, right? It's incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know there's definitely been periods in my life where I was like hell bent on like, no, I
Right.
need to be right. I need to be
Yeah.
right. I need to be right. But as I'm getting older, it's just like,
Yeah.
nah, dude. Like, it's a really bad look first off because it just makes you look like a douchebag who like
Right.
knows it all and talks over people, and yeah, it's just not a good look. So yeah, listening more to people
Right.
and not obsessively needing to be correct all the time is definitely good. And then you learn more. You'll hear other people's perspectives.
And
Especially when it comes to things like political issues, like you really should be listening to both sides of arguments.
they'll either confirm or deny your your beliefs.
Yeah.
It's not like it's gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
it,
exactly. What's it gonna? It's not gonna hurt you. It's just an idea. It's not.
Yeah.
An idea ain't gonna hurt you.
You'll know if you don't believe it, and that's okay. But perhaps you'll budge. I've seen it happen, and I've experienced it in real time where people have explained, let's say, ideas that I'm averse to, and then I feel myself shift a little bit. And I'm like, I don't want to admit it, but they're right a little bit. And you just go like click or a little notch.
Yeah.
And the more clicks you have, the more well-rounded you are.
Yeah, or when you hear people rambling off conspiracy theories, and your immediate one is just be like, "No, you're goddamn
Right.
wrong."
No, that's a very good example of how you should be open-minded.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe there is a shred of truth to it. Like maybe it'll just change your perspective on the world a little bit.
And
Like
if
even
you
if they are wrong, or maybe it'll prove you'll look it up and then disprove them, and then you'll
Yes.
gain more knowledge from
Yes.
that. Like there's good reasons to listen to the other side of an argument, even if it's just to disprove it, because then you'll gain more knowledge. Like.
Well, I think if you if you set out to disprove it, they'll catch on to that and be really averse to it. But if you aren't open-minded, you shut down the conversation. So there's no chance of dialogue in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I learned is listen and then try to find common ground. Like for instance, the moon thing, and then they were like, oh, I think we've gone to orbit, we just haven't gone to the moon. So then it's like, oh, let's talk about that. And then you can find an entry point, and you can expand their knowledge. And then what they realize is, oh, this guy actually knows a lot about rocket science and space flight. Perhaps I should listen to him. And that wouldn't have never happened if I was just like, no, you're full of crap.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and even with things as like ridiculous as like flat earthers, like
right.
Open
up the dialogue. Let the ideas speak for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Like let them talk to astrophysicists, and then maybe like everyone will learn something. Like even just through the dialogue of that, I bet you'll learn a bunch about like about the way that our universe works and the solar system works.
Yeah, it's all a process, and it's fundamentally tied to communication and dialogue. All right, our camera went out again. I think we should wrap it up.
All right, yeah, let's wrap it up.
It was a good episode.
Yeah, leave comments and stuff, and like and subscribe.
Please
I feel obliged to say that.
Like, subscribe, and share, because it's not what you're supposed to say these days.
Yeah, that thing. But yeah, hopefully everyone enjoyed it.
Till next time.